NASA is one of the most highly respected and loved institutions on the planet. Full to the brim of heroes, behind the scenes and in the public eye. They have walked on the moon, placed incredible satellites in orbit, sent spaceships to the edges of the solar system, and invented hundreds of highly advanced items we now use every day in our homes. They have taken us to places no man has gone before and shown us the wonder of the universe. And yet, only 60 years before they even existed, Victoria was on the throne of the British Empire. The Boer War was going strong, and nobody had even taken off the ground in a powered aeroplane. How did mankind, in such a short space of time, manage to put a man on the moon? For thousands and thousands of years, man lived a life that was the same. A man living in 1000 AD lived pretty much the same life to that of a man living in 4000 BC. But then man entered the 20th century and it all changed. Why?
A former NASA astronaut, Dr. Brian O'Leary, stated that there is abundant evidence that we are being contacted, that civilizations have been visiting us for a very long time, that their appearance is bizarre from any type of traditional, materialistic, Western point of view, that these visitors use the technologies of consciousness. They use toroids. They use co-rotating magnetic disks for their propulsion systems. That seems to be a common denominator of the UFO phenomenon. Prime Ministers, Chief Cabinet Secretaries and NASA astronauts all testifying to the truth that thousands of ordinary people across the globe know as fact. That aliens exist, that they have and are visiting our planet.
Apparently, Ben Rich, the former CEO of Lockheed Skunk Works, confirmed to witnesses that there were two kinds of UFOs. Humans designed one, based on various crash site retrievals such as the one at Roswell. We were also given actual craft by aliens to work on. The second kind of UFO is the real McCoy, alien technology. He claimed that the US government handed over control of the information about this human and alien cooperation to an international board of directors. Ben Rich believed that it was not in the public interest to know about such things. We couldn't handle the truth, he said.
In 2006, the American Embassy in Lithuania received the following cable from the then Lithuanian Prime Minister, Albinas Januska. He stated that a group of UFOs are making their influence from the cosmos, and that there exists a decreasing group of persons who are trying to rationally analyze the situation and objectively evaluate what is happening. In 2007, the Japanese Chief Cabinet Secretary said, "I am sure that unidentified flying objects exist."
Don Phillips was in the US Air Force and worked at Skunk Works. He has since come out with revelations about UFOs. He said the UFOs were huge, would come to a stop and do 60-degree turns and immediately reverse action. These are statements that thousands of UFO eyewitnesses around the world will recognise today, and it is the kind of movement impossible for known human craft.
The world's largest and most powerful organisation with the biggest array of technology ever known to man is NASA. They too know the truth, and they are covering it up. Recently, the number of known alien planets has increased by 60%. NASA's very own Kepler Space Telescope has discovered over 1,300 new exoplanets, many of which they claim might very well contain life. The total number now stands at well over 3,000 and counting. Paul Hertz, director of the Astrophysics Division at NASA, said, "Most stars in our galaxy have planetary systems, and a reasonable fraction of stars in our galaxy have potentially habitable planets." The number is increasing all the time. Most of the stars within our own galaxy have planetary systems that are potentially habitable.
Scientists and engineers were given new names and new homes in America. Area 51 was born. Roswell saw an infamous UFO crash, and later, in 1958, NASA emerged in the race to space. Strangely, one of the influential figures in the creation of the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, strongly linked with NASA, was a man called Jack Parsons. But before he was a rocket engineer, he was in fact a member of Aleister Crowley's occult group, the Ordo Templi Orientis. Here, he met and worked with the creator of the Scientologists, L. Ron Hubbard, and together they called upon the goddess Babylon to come down to Earth. This is the same man that is held in high esteem for his scientific knowledge of rocket propulsion. He died in 1952 in an explosion that many see as more than an accident. In 2002, a man called Gary McKinnon hacked secret US government files looking for evidence of the UFO cover-up he believed existed. In an interview with AncientX.com, he stated, "One of these people was a NASA photographic expert, and she said that in Building 8 of Johnson Space Center, they regularly airbrushed out images of UFOs from the high-resolution satellite imaging. What she said was there. There were folders called filtered and unfiltered, processed and raw, something like that. I got one picture out of the folder, and bear in mind this is a 56k dial-up, so a very slow internet connection in dial-up days. Using the remote control program, I turned the colour down to 4-bit colour, and the screen resolution really, really low. And even then the picture was still juddering as it came onto the screen. But what came on the screen was amazing. It was a culmination of all my efforts. It was a picture of something that definitely wasn't man-made. It was above the Earth's hemisphere. It kind of looked like a satellite. It was cigar-shaped and it had geodesic domes above, below, to the left, the right and both ends of it. And although it was a really low-resolution picture, it was very close up. This thing was hanging in space, the Earth's hemisphere visible below it, and no rivets, no seams, none of the stuff associated with normal man-made manufacturing. Could it be that what McKinnon is saying is true? Are NASA covering up knowledge of UFOs? Well, The facts are simple. NASA have sent up a lot of astronauts, and so have other agencies now, such as the European Space Agency, the Russians and Chinese. In all cases, there have been reports from these highly trained, intellectual astronauts that they have seen things they cannot explain. Indeed, there is in fact a lot of footage in the public domain, taken by NASA equipment showing such things as strange shapes, lights, and even peculiar serpent movements in our atmosphere. If NASA and the Air Force have for decades been working on technology found by the Nazis, then there will by now be a lot of unknown flying objects out there controlled by humans. The question is this: are there any out there that are not?
There is a man who worked for NASA as a spacecraft operator at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. He was involved in over 650 missions, including the Mercury and Apollo expeditions and the Space Shuttle period. His name is Clark McClelland, and it was during this time on the Space Shuttle mission that he witnessed something very strange. According to McClelland, he was monitoring the mission from his desk at the Kennedy Launch Control Center when he saw something. Here's his statement. I, Clark C. McClelland, former spacecraft operator, Space Shuttle Fleet, personally observed an 8 to 9 foot tall ET on 27-inch video monitors while on duty in the Space Kennedy Center, Launch Control Center. The ET was standing upright in the Space Shuttle payload bay, having a discussion with two tethered US NASA astronauts. I also observed on my monitors the spacecraft of the ET, as it was in a stabilized, safe orbit to the rear of the Space Shuttle main engine pods. I observed this incident for about 1 minute and 7 seconds. Plenty of time to memorize all that I was observing. It was an ET and alien starship. Could he have been mistaken, seeing something different, and his mind filled in the gaps? He points out that in many years he was working on these things, he had strong visual recognition of crafts created and flown by the human race, whether secret or otherwise. He claims that he was not the only witness and that colleagues secretly confided that they too had witnessed the alien. Surely the man is making it all up and never worked at NASA. The fact is, he did. There is photographic evidence, and NASA have never denied his employment. He has also pointed a finger strongly at NASA for being a military establishment. Here's what he said. The Pentagon owns NASA. Some of the Department of Defense missions I participated in were top secret. Those missions carried TS satellites and other space mission hardware into orbit where several crews met with ETs. He claims that the US government has been keeping a secret a long-standing military alliance with aliens for decades, in league with the Human Exchange Program. A close friend of McClelland is the astronaut Edgar Mitchell. He has openly stated his belief in aliens visiting Earth. Mitchell stated that he was 90% sure that many of the thousands of UFOs recorded since the 1940s belongs to visitors from other planets. Mitchell is one of a growing number of NASA astronauts that are coming out from behind the veil of lies. Edgar Mitchell was the sixth man to walk on the moon. He was an highly intelligent man, top astronaut and American hero. He states quite openly that very high-ranking military officials saw alien ships monitoring the 1940s nuclear weapons tests. His strong belief in alien visitation started as he landed on the moon in 1971, and his discoveries have since simply boosted that belief. But why would aliens be interested in our nuclear tests? He said they wanted to know about our military capabilities. My own experience talking to people has made it clear that ETs had been attempting to keep us from going to war and to help create peace on Earth. He says that witnesses who were manning the missile bases at the time have come forward and backed his claim, adding more intellectual weight to the cover-up. He said other officers from bases in the Pacific told me their test missiles were frequently shot down by alien spacecraft. Rich Terrile is the director of the Center for Evolutionary Computation and Automated Design at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory. He posited the theory that may upset a few believers in God. His theory is that the real God is in fact a universal computer program. Here's what he said. Right now, the fastest NASA supercomputers are cranking away at double the speed of the human brain. His point being that more advanced computers would be even faster. If you make a simple calculation using Moore's law, which claims computers double in power every 2 years, you'll find that these supercomputers, inside of a decade, will have the ability to compute an entire human lifetime of 80 years, including every thought ever conceived during that time, in the span of a month. In fact, Moore's law is being proven incorrect because quantum computing will do these calculations in milliseconds. In quantum mechanics, particles do not have a definite state unless they're being observed. Many theorists have spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to explain this. One explanation is that we're living within a simulation, seeing what we need to see when we need to see it. What I find inspiring is that even if we are in the simulation, or many orders of magnitude down in levels of simulation, somewhere along the line something escaped the primordial ooze to become us, and to result in simulations that made us, and that's cool. This explanation for our existence may sound even crazier than one that includes a god, but it does explain some things, such as why we can't find alien life, even though the mathematical equations show there should be an abundance. The cosmic computer won't allow it. Yet. Any beings outside of this massive simulation would not think the same as those inside the simulation. If they occasionally popped in and out of this grand matrix, they would appear the same as life in our existence, but in reality be simple cloaks or holograms. Such a theory explains beautifully the hundreds of anomalies we come across when researching aliens. The ability of craft to move in seemingly physical, impossible ways.
Ben Rich was the CEO of Lockheed Skunk Works and was called the father of the stealth fighter bomber. The MUFON UFO Journal revealed some startling new evidence about what he knew. It appears that on his deathbed in 1995, Rich confirmed that aliens were real, that they had visited the Earth, and that the US military actually travels in space. The actual revelation itself came from Tom Keller, an aerospace engineer and once system analyst for NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory. Skunk Works is Lockheed's secret research laboratory, and Keller claims that he was one of 50 or so engineers making secret technology for highly secretive missions. He states that the US already have the ability to travel among the stars in black projects. As we suspected, Keller confirms that such travel does not use chemical propulsion in the standard model. When he was asked how such technology worked, he replied, "Let me ask you, how does ESP work?" The questioner answered, "All points in time and space are connected." Keller replies, "That's how it works."
A massive percentage of what NASA actually does is highly secret. There is good reason. NASA originated in the late 1950s, emerging from military research. Its main staff were military, and it has always maintained a very close link. Billions of dollars of research is carried out by NASA on behalf of the military. It is their purpose to protect the people of America from whatever the threat may be, and this includes panic. Recently, there has been a massive increase, albeit gradually, of information and suggestions coming from NASA about the possibility of life out there. They are already getting close for disclosure, and it must be done slowly and carefully, because the media are hungry wolves who love to liven up the public. Nobody wants international panic. It would be catastrophic. Recently, thousands of people cried cover-up when NASA's International Space Station live feed was cut suddenly, just as a UFO passed in clear view. The object was a horseshoe shape, and nobody has come forward with an explanation. Later footage recorded by people not working at NASA reveals a ship leaving the Earth's atmosphere and docking with another UFO, neither of which are NASA's. This is just one of hundreds of such cases, and it grows daily. The cover-ups began many years ago. Scott Carpenter was a test pilot and astronaut at NASA for many years. He said, "At no time when the astronauts were in space were they alone. There was a constant surveillance by UFOs." What exactly did he mean? He meant that the astronauts were constantly being buzzed by UFOs. There have indeed been several astronauts spoken out about their experiences, but most are silenced.
But in April of 1979, cosmonaut Viktor Afanasyev saw something he couldn't explain when he docked with the Soviet space station. Here is what he said. "It followed us during half of our orbit. We observed it on the light side, and when we entered the shadow side, it disappeared completely. It was an engineering structure, made from some type of metal, approximately 40 meters long within a hull. The object was narrow here and wider there, and inside there were openings. Some places had projections like small wings. The object stayed very close to us. We photographed it, and our photos showed it to be 23 to 28 meters away." The photos were never released. Maurice Chatelain was a former NASA communications chief. He said, "The encounter was common knowledge in NASA. All Apollo and Gemini fighters were followed by space vehicles of extraterrestrial origin, or UFOs if you prefer to call them that. Every time it occurred, the astronauts informed Mission Control, who then ordered absolute silence. I think Walter Schirra aboard Mercury 8 was the first astronaut to use the codename Santa Claus to indicate the presence of UFOs. But it was James Lovell on board the Apollo 8 command module who came out from behind the moon and said for everybody to hear, 'Please be informed that there is a Santa Claus.' Even though this happened on Christmas Day 1968, many people sensed a hidden meaning in those words."
Gordon Cooper was an original astronaut with the Mercury project. A perfect, all-American hero with a brilliant mind. He was planned to go to the moon, and so Cooper was chosen for the relatively unknown project to fly astronauts to Mars in 1981. It was planned to use nuclear-powered engines, which were actually made, but then the program was cancelled. Before all of this, Cooper had been a pilot, and in 1951 he was flying over Germany in an F-86 jet. Just as his craft reached supersonic speed, he and the other pilots looked up and saw a large group of flying saucers in formation. The UFOs were higher than even his jet could fly, and they were going way too fast. Over the course of several days, he and more pilots witnessed hundreds more. He was completely convinced that those craft were not of human origin. They all dutifully reported their sightings and awaited the response. High-flying seed pods. He knew that the answer was a lie, but as a member of the Air Force, he simply accepted it and carried on with his duties. Even at that time, years before his exploring of space with NASA, Cooper knew that UFOs were in reality aliens. By 1978, he decided not to remain silent and wrote a letter to the United Nations. It said, "I do believe UFOs exist, and that the truly unexplained ones are from some other, technically advanced civilization. I believe that these extraterrestrial vehicles and their crews are visiting this planet from other planets, which are obviously a little more advanced than we are here on Earth. I feel that we need to have a top-level, coordinated program to scientifically collect and analyze data from all over the Earth concerning any type of encounter, and to determine how best to interface with these visitors in a friendly fashion." He later said that the aliens seem to show themselves when and where and to whom they want. "I wish they would pick some people who really want to meet them, instead of a couple of fishermen in Mississippi." Cooper, like Mitchell, believes that Roswell was a real alien event, and even explained how the military had live aliens. Back in the 1950s, at the White Sands Proving Ground in New Mexico, a friend of his was a rocket scientist. One day, while working alone, his friend heard somebody calling his name. He looked around and saw nobody. Then again the voice was heard. It said, "Don't worry, I'm above you in a craft a few miles up." According to Cooper, the voice was that of an alien spy who was looking for information on what the humans were doing. At this time, they were testing nuclear power, weapons, and advanced rockets. The visitor wanted information to allow him to live among us. The man agreed to help and brought the visitor books. He went aboard the craft and noted how the alien looked very much like us, but had trouble breathing in our atmosphere. It took him 5 years to adjust. The story behind all of this is very interesting. It turns out that the visitor was part of a group of explorers. They had no wish to invade, but just to find a home.
Phobos is a moon of Mars and has been studied and photographed. One image made everybody sit up, including the scientists. Dr. Fred Singer used to advise Eisenhower on space developments. He studied the pictures, and he suggested that Phobos, instead of being a natural moon, might in fact be an artificially created satellite. From the artifacts on Mars and this new image, it is easy to draw a conclusion that there was once an ancient civilization on that remote planet. Singer wasn't alone. The Russian astrophysicist Shklovsky also stated that Phobos was probably a hollow, artificial satellite, and for him, proved that Mars had once been occupied. His reason for this? An extensive study of the orbit of Phobos around Mars proved that it was not an ordinary object. The evidence stacks up. The once chief of applied mathematics at NASA, Raymond H. Wilson Jr., stated that Phobos might in fact be a colossal base orbiting Mars. What was in the pictures of Phobos? A monolith on such a vast scale that it can be seen from space.
What we do know is that there are literally thousands of pilots, both military and commercial, who have witnessed UFOs visiting the Earth, and not just above the atmosphere. Some can't be silenced. A woman known as Jackie recently came forward. Her name is being kept a secret for her own safety. She claims she worked for NASA and that she actually witnessed humans on Mars. Through the live feed that goes directly into NASA, she saw humans in spacesuits walking on the planet. If she really worked for NASA, then just how was she able to see such a thing? It turns out that she was working on the downlink telemetry from the Viking lander. Here's what she said in a live interview on Coast to Coast Radio. That old Viking rover was running around. Then I saw two men in spacesuits. Not the bulky suits we normally use, but they looked protective. They came over the horizon, walking to the Viking explorer. When she saw this, along with 6 other colleagues, they immediately reported it. We ran upstairs, but they locked the door and taped paper over the door so we couldn't see. My question is, were they our guys? None of her colleagues have ever come forward, but there are hundreds of reports of secret space programs starting right back in the 1960s.
Buzz Aldrin was the second man to walk on the moon, as far as we know. When speaking on a US cable TV show, he said that we ought to visit the moons of Mars because of the monolith. When people find out about it, he said, they're going to ask, who put that there? Well, who did? NASA remains silent. Strangely, the Mars orbiter also found a huge monolith on Mars as well. So, we have astronauts saying they have seen flying ships, lights, and strange buildings on the moon. We have craft that have crashed and been spirited away by military personnel. We have sudden spikes in the rise of technology following thousands of years of relative similarity. We have huge monoliths, strange shapes, and artifacts on Mars and its moon. And all the time, we have silence from NASA.
Colonel Buzz Aldrin was with NASA for years and one of the first men to set foot on the moon. He was a national hero. He saw and experienced things. These experiences affected him. He had a nervous breakdown. At least, that's the official story. Author Fred Steckling claims that Aldrin was silenced. The reason was very simple. Aldrin saw alien bases on the moon. It is claimed by hundreds of investigators that actual close-up photographs of the moon have been tampered with. They have been airbrushed to remove what is really there, hidden from our sight. It is a stated fact that all photographs, then and now, are vetted by NASA before release to the public. Why? If there's nothing to hide, then why? Aldrin claimed that they were not the first people to set foot upon the moon. Somebody, or something, had been there before. He claims he took photographs of footprints, never released by NASA. Alien vehicles flew within 50 feet of a US space vehicle for one full Earth orbit, and then the AV departed. Again, while Aldrin was present, Buzz Aldrin had a nervous breakdown because of these events and the pressure not to talk. There have been 22 deaths, many suicides, at JSC in Houston. No astronaut who has seen AVs or ETs is allowed to talk about it, even amongst themselves. If they do, and are caught, they may be fined, publicly humiliated, imprisoned, or have all pensions and future salaries taken away. Maybe we will never know what Aldrin and the others saw, but they weren't the last astronauts to report strange phenomena, only to be later silenced. Buzz Aldrin himself said, "There was something out there that was close enough to be observed, and what could it be?" Mike Collins decided he thought he could see it in the telescope, and he was able to do that, and when it was in one position, but when you made it a real shot, it was sort of L-shaped. We just cautiously asked Houston, where, how far away was the SIVB? Dr. David Baker, a senior NASA scientist, said, NASA knew very little about the object reported by the Apollo 11 crew. It was obviously an unidentified flying object, but such objects were not uncommon, and the history of even Earth orbit space flights going back over the previous years indicated that several crews saw objects. There were a lot of people within the program who went off later and became convinced that UFOs existed, and that led to some concern on NASA's part, where they got the agreement of the crew never to publicly talk about these things, for fear of ridicule.
What was it that Neil Armstrong and others saw on the moon all those years ago? And why does NASA refuse to explain statements like this from Neil Armstrong as the Apollo landed on the surface of the moon?
They're here. They are right over there, and looking at the size of those ships, it is obvious they don't like us being here.
Now, of course, NASA have been further than the moon. They are on Mars. A quick search of the internet will bring up dozens of UFOologists pointing out images from NASA craft that have unusual features, shapes, even lights. There is evidence the pictures have been altered. A registered and certified geologist called Ronald Hicks examines the Martian pictures in detail. He states that much of what we see are not in fact ordinary rocks, but artifacts. When you walk through a desert, he said, you may find a rock in the shape of a circle, or one like a triangle, or another shaped like a rectangle. But you won't find one with all the shapes on it. These, he says, must be made by intelligent hands, and are therefore artifacts. He enlarged pictures from Mars and revealed how these shapes could be clearly seen.
Another astronaut and test pilot to witness something was Major Robert White. While flying at 58 miles above the Earth in an X-15 aircraft in 1962, Major White saw something strange. He said over the radio to control, "I have no idea what it could be. It was greyish in colour and about 30 to 40 feet away. There are things out there. There absolutely is." It appears that the Russians don't silence their cosmonauts half as much as the Americans. Here's another cosmonaut, Musa Manarov of the Mir mission in 1991. It happened during a visit mission, when all our attention was focused on the slowly approaching space capsule. I was close to the great porthole, from where I could see our approaching visitors. I watched everything very carefully. When the capsule came closer, I filmed it with a professional Betacam camera. Suddenly, I noticed something below the spaceship, which first I looked like an antenna. Only when I looked closer and analysed the situation, I realised that there was no antenna at all, but first I thought it was part of the construction. So I grabbed the radio and told them, "Hey boys, you are losing something." This of course alarmed them. With all my experience, especially with docking manoeuvres in space, I can tell you that especially in this phase, simply nothing can break off at all. If something would have been lost, it would have been torn off long before, during the launch, the manoeuvres, the turn, all these much more energetic flight phases. Now we were just gliding slowly towards each other without any pressure on the capsule. But then this something started to move downwards. When it flew away, it attracted all our attention. It looked like it was rotating. It was difficult to estimate its dimensions. If it was close or far away, I could not say. It was in free sight, and in space, it is difficult to estimate any size and distance. I can only say for sure that it was not very close, since I set the camera for infinity. If it would have been just a screw or something close to us, it would have been out of focus. The object was quite far away. In any case, at least 300 feet, since this was the distance of the space capsule, and I had the impression that it was beyond it. It is possible that it was a kind of UFO. We can't say with any certainty what it was. It was definitely not a bigger piece of space junk, no rocket or part of so, since this would have been located. The space surveillance, ours and the American, locate all bigger objects in space. They are followed. For every minute we know their position and their flight direction. If such an object would have come so close to the Mir, they would have located it and informed us. I don't think it was a piece of space junk or debris. There is a lot of that in the Earth orbit, satellite parts, rocket parts, just everything. But our space surveillance locates them, and according to them, there was nothing. Another Mir cosmonaut said, "On the last 2 flights I saw something. During the flight of 1990, I called our commander, 'Come to the porthole.' Unfortunately, but this is typical, we did not manage to put a film in the camera quickly enough to film it. We looked on Newfoundland. The atmosphere was completely clear, and suddenly a kind of sphere appeared. I want to compare it with a Christmas tree decoration. Beautiful, shiny, glittering. I saw it for 10 seconds. The sphere appeared in the same way as it disappeared again. What it was, what size it had, I don't know. There was nothing I could compare it with. I was like struck by lightning by this phenomena. It was a perfect sphere, glittering like a Christmas tree decoration. I reported to the Mission Control Centre, but I did not say that I had seen a UFO. I said I saw a kind of unusual phenomenon. I had to be careful with my choice of words. I don't want someone to speculate too much or quote me wrong.
Earlier, the Apollo 15 mission found actual tracks on the moon to which NASA has never given an answer. Here's what was said.
Irwin. Tracks here as we go down the slope. MC. Just follow the tracks, huh? Irwin. Right. We know that's a fairly good run. We're bearing 320. Hitting range for 413. I can't get over these lineations. That layering on Mount Hadley. Scott. I can't either. That's really spectacular. Irwin. They sure look beautiful. Scott. Talk about organization. Irwin. That's the most organized structure I've ever seen. It's so uniform in width. Nothing we've seen before this has shown such uniform thickness from the top of the tracks to the bottom.
The crew then saw something spectacular.
You talked about something mysterious. Okay, Gordy, when we pitched around, I'd like to tell you about something we saw. When we were coming about 30 or 40 feet out, there were a lot of objects, white things, flying by. It looked as if they were being propelled or ejected, but I'm not convinced of that. We copy that, Charlie.
There is little surprise that past employees want to remain secret. Apart from the fact they would probably be in danger from the secret services, they would also find themselves ridiculed by the media and a brainwashed public. In 2005, an ex-employee of the Defense Intelligence Agency began leaking classified information about an alien exchange program called Project Serpo. This project began when the authorities recovered aliens from the crash at Roswell. The ex-DIA employee stated that it was one of the aliens and even helped organise a special team of humans to visit his home world, known as Serpo, in the Zeta Reticuli system. This happened in 1965, and the team stayed on Serpo until 1978. 2 died there, 2 stayed on the planet, and the rest returned. All have died due to radiation poisoning.
Dr. Brian O'Leary, a former NASA astronaut and Princeton professor of physics, said, "There is abundant evidence that we are being contacted, that civilizations have been visiting us for a very long time, that their appearance is bizarre from any type of traditional materialistic Western point of view, that these visitors use the technologies of consciousness, they use toroids, they use co-rotating magnetic disks for their propulsion systems. That seems to be common denominator of the UFO phenomenon." And not just ex-NASA employees. Here's what the former Canadian Defence Minister, Paul Hellyer, said. "Decades ago, visitors from other planets warned us about the direction we were heading and offered to help. Instead, some of us interpreted their visits as a threat and decided to shoot first and ask questions after. It is ironic that the US should be fighting monstrously expensive wars, allegedly to bring democracy to those countries, when it itself can no longer claim to be called a democracy when trillions, and I mean thousands of billions of dollars, have been spent on black projects which both Congress and the Commander-in-Chief have been kept deliberately in the dark. There have now been hundreds of whistleblowers, people who have worked for government and corporations and who refused to remain silent. Most of these people are not crazy fools. Most of these people are professionals with degrees, doctorates, and are in positions of authority. These are people who were once astronauts, fighter pilots, scientists, engineers, and even intelligence officers. We have proof that the authorities have covered up the truth by touching up pictures and destroying documents. Around the world, ordinary people are photographing, filming, and sighting strange craft and lights, and have been doing so for decades. We believe it's time for disclosure. Stop treating us like fools. Stop talking about little green men and belittling the search for life out there. We're big grown-ups now, and we are more than ready to meet their leaders.